you, Deb?
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. It's so much fun, isn't it? Good thing I can edit this video. And by the way, once I'm recording this, I will edit it, and we will provide you with the link once I edit it and give you the YouTube channel. So tonight, I'm going to read off my papers because you have a pretty cool panel tonight. So I'm going to start with Mr. Derek Graham, who is a parent. He has lived with experience and is an attorney with Resch, Boot, Phillips and Graham, LLC Planning in Dublin, Ohio. For over 40 years, this Dublin-based firm has focused on providing custom-tailored estate, special needs, and business plans for individuals, families, and business owners throughout Ohio. Derek has an ongoing virtual training thing. He's like one of the key guys talking about guardianship, trust, stable accounts, and benefits. And I thought he would be a great addition to this panel because there may be some siblings that are currently thinking about this or need a better understanding of what's down the road. So he's also a father of 2 daughters, and one of his daughters has Down syndrome. So thanks, Derek, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, and now Veronica Zielinski, she is our youngest panel guest. She's also a sibling with lived experience and is a support administrator at Cuyahoga County Board DD. Veronica was a part of our lifespan of a sibling panel that we did about 2 years ago. So if you check out our YouTube channel, that conversation is there. Her younger brother is very much a part of her life, and she has had plans most of her life wanting him to be in it. So she'll tell you more about that. So you met Barbara Safaris. She is a sibling with lived experience with 2 brothers, one with IDD. Barbara has an extensive experience serving the disability community. She is a Chart of the Life Course ambassador, Life Course Nexus facilitator, and she's my mentor with the Chart of the Life program. Barbara will be presenting the second webinar on relationships and community mapping, the difference between caring for someone and caring with somebody. Barbara has been a terrific mentor to me, so saying that again. And then we have Sarah Hall, who is a sibling with lived experience and has extensive background in the disability community as well. She is a research associate at the University of Minnesota Institute on Community Integration. She is engaged in research about the social inclusion of older adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities transitioning to retirement. She has a score full of other information. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll create an attachment with all the bios of our guests tonight. She is a fellow of the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities and serves as the secretary treasurer of their board of directors. She's previously was an associate professor at Ashland University here in Ohio, and served as on the board of directors with Ohio SIBS for 8 years. So we welcome Sarah, who is a sibling of an older brother with multiple disabilities. Sarah will be doing our third training. I don't know if it's the club sandwich generation or it's the sandwich generation, but this will address adults that are juggling the caregiving of aging parents, their own children, as well as their brothers and sisters with disabilities. And then my last person but not least is Diana Temple, who also comes to us with lived experience and is a sibling to her sister, who is older and has developmental disability. Diana has a master's in art from the University of Missouri and an occupational therapy doctorate from the University of Toledo. She joined AmeriCorps in 2009 as a Special Olympics coach and began her career work with people with disabilities. As an artist, she has created various photography projects to bring visibility to accessibility issues and the disability community. She cares deeply about people with disabilities and their siblings. Diana will be presenting our 4th session on sibling support for kids and teens with brothers and sisters with disabilities. So that was a mouthful, huh? But so much good stuff there. So I'm going to go ahead and get this panel started with some questions. Are we ready? All right. So I did ask them just to start off is tell a little brief something about yourself, your age, the age difference between your sibling, where you are in the child lineup. Are you the middle child, the oldest, or the only? Or you wouldn't be the only in that case, yeah. Where you grew up, or what's your major in college, and did you do Special Olympics with your sib? So we'll start with Barb.
Well, thanks, Deb. I know I'm the oldest on this panel, so I'll just start with that. I am the oldest of 3. My middle brother, Jim, when he was 2 years younger than me, when he was in his 30s, he was in an accident that affected his ability to earn a living. So he could no longer work and to get through his day. So Jim had what we call an acquired disability because it occurred after 22. Because it was acquired, there were there were no services available to him. So it was all provided by family, me. My youngest brother, Nick, was 4 years younger than me and was diagnosed with a developmental disability when he was 6 months old, and I was 4. And that was in the late 50s. There were no county boards. There were no public services. So he received home-based services with therapists coming in our home within a month of his diagnosis, and everything was private pay. So I learned about occupational therapy, speech therapy, and sliding scales before I went to kindergarten. My brother needed total physical supports. So in other words, someone had to dress him, bathe him, feed him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No surprise, my major in college, my brother had very, very difficult speech to understand. He had cerebral palsy. Both of my brothers are deceased. And I became a speech language pathologist because I met one when I was 9, and she said, I saw there was something in him. I knew he understood, and she introduced him to an electric typewriter in the early 60s when those were not even in homes. And IBM donated one to him. So I became a speech language pathologist. I also worked as a support administrator for Cuyahoga County. And we did not do Special Olympics. I'm sure it was in place, but we lived in the country there. He never went to the same school system that Jim and I did, but he did go through public school.
Thanks, Barb. How about you, Sarah?
Wow, thank you. So I am Sarah, and I have 2 older brothers. I have Tyler and Charlie. When Charlie was a baby, my parents adopted him, and he had multiple disabilities, and they were choosing to do special needs adoption, as they called it back then. And so ever since I was born, I've just been a part of the disability community. And so you know a little of my background. I was a high school special education teacher. I was a professor who taught, special education. I do research about people with disabilities in the community, with people with disabilities in the community. And so obviously it's impacted my vocation. But I also play softball. I used to fence. I did my own thing as well, which was something that my parents were very, very keen on doing, is making sure we had our own paths in our life. So Charlie is about 5 years older than me, so he must be about 48 now. I'm about 43. And he lives in a group home, we'll call it. It's an apartment with 2 other men about his age. He goes to day services. He seems to like it. I am never satisfied, but but I need to think about him and what he likes too. So he did participate in Boy Scouts with a group of other people who had disabilities. He participated in Special Olympics. It was before the time where like we really got siblings involved or like other people in the community involved. So I watched him and I loved it. I was so proud of him. And I don't know, maybe that's it for now.
Did you do Special Olympics?
Yeah, my brother did, but I did not support him in that. I know there's unified sports now and everything. So that was after my time.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. All right, Miss Veronica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Veronica. My brother's name is Frank. He is my little brother.
Yes, this is for him. This is a sibling support group.
He is 23. So we just went through the whole madness of transitioning out of high school. And we're from right here in Cleveland. I studied social work in college. I was really geared towards special ed for a long time, but I knew that I couldn't realistically be as involved as I wanted to be with Frank and teach all day long. I just knew I did not have the patience and stamina for that. So I went into social work, and I'm currently a support administrator at the county board in Cuyahoga County. We were not involved in Special Olympics, as Frank has always had some pretty significant behaviors. He has a laundry list of diagnostics, including autism and a genetic disorder and a brain malformation and lots of different things going on. So he always had considerable behaviors that made integration difficult, but we did several programs early on in his life when he was young and little and easily transportable. We did a lot of programs that were similar to Special Olympics, and hoping to find something like that now that he's all grown up, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Veronica. Okay, Miss Diana.
Hi, I'm Diana Temple. I am the middle sister. I have my older sister, Jackie, that has an intellectual disability, and she was born 5 years before me. And then I have a younger sister, Emily, and she's a nurse, but she's only 18 months apart from me. So yeah, so it's us 3 girls. I was a lot of times called the big little sister, and my sister requires full care. And something kind of cool about my sister is we learned to walk at the same time. She was sick, like 6 and 7, and I was just learning to walk, and we used to walk around on our walkers together. So I think that inspired me for going into occupational therapy. I know that was physical therapy, but I got to see her in a lot of different therapies and hang out with her at school. And but unfortunately, she went to a different school than I did. So a lot of people didn't even know that I had an older sister. And that was kind of difficult for me during that time. But I eventually, I actually didn't go into the disability field at all. I started out in art, and I ended up doing a documentary project on my sister's workshop. And that kind of brought me into the world because I never really got to see what she did all day long as an adult. And then I joined AmeriCorps and became a Special Olympics coach and did that for a long, long time. My sister was not in the Special Olympics. It's not really something she would like, but I really enjoyed the Special Olympics, and I felt like I was home in the disability community through coaching. So thank you. Oh, you're muted, Deb.
I'm going to keep the role of the siblings, but I am going to tap into you next, Derek, to get your point of view as a parent and your involvement with Ohio Sibs, how it has impacted you. I kid about the Special Olympics because the very first one, they were either in Massachusetts and in New York, SNUI, New York University. And that was a thing. I remember having a huge badge that said volunteer. And of course, my mom connected me with my brother. My brother could care less about Special Olympics. And of course, his event was the last of the day, and it was softball throw. Well, he didn't throw a ball a whole lot, but I'll tell you, he was so mad. He threw it so far that he won. So who knew? But we chose our battles, and Special Olympics was just not going to be his thing. But I'm also a sibling. I am the middle child. My brother's 5 years younger, and I have a sister 17 months older, and she was a special ed teacher for 30 years, and I think she's on this call. But we grew up in New York, and so Rodney went to Rosemary Kennedy School, named after President John F. Kennedy's sister, Rosemary, who had disabilities. And so it was separate schools during this time. So I'm a little behind Barb in that there was kind of a vision of including kids in an education environment. My major in college was fashion merchandising. And I went to Slippery Rock College thinking I wanted to do special ed. And my mother just said, I think you need to come home, go to school in Manhattan, let's do something with your life. But here I am, reconnected with my people, which are all of you probably on this call. So Mr. Derek, let's ask you, as you had not, well, you're a parent. And so of course you're probably concerned about both your daughters. What's your take?
Yeah, and so actually I have 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters that are 13, 11, and 9. It's my oldest daughter that has Down syndrome. And I've participated in the SIBS group for years now, been on their board of directors. And I really enjoy doing it because I see that as an investment for them, my other 2 daughters. Because in my law firm, we do a lot of work with families who have loved ones with developmental disabilities. And when the parents do pass away, there's a transition there. And Barb already hit on this. And there's a lot of planning that can go into that transition, or sometimes there's zero planning that goes into that transition. And that's hard for siblings when there's been zero planning that goes into that transition. And so it's something we preach about all the time here at my law firm, is how important that is for the role of siblings, to be involved and to understand what's coming and what that's going to look like. And so, yeah, I love what the SIBS groups does. I love hearing stories of SIBS because as a parent, I'm always naturally curious as to how much and in what ways it's impacting my other daughters, to see what their daughter goes through. And when I say goes through, she has a lot of health issues that we're always dealing with. And so just seeing how that plays out in their lives and how it affects them. And so, yeah, thanks for having me.
And I don't know if I mentioned it, but Derek is also on the board for Ohio SIBS. So thank you so much for being a big part of that. So here we go with our first question, all right? So what was it like growing up in your household? And what I'm thinking of is, were you connected as a family? Was it disjointed? Was it nutty? Because we all come from, different backgrounds, and most of us are not trained on how to be a sibling or a parent. It just kind of comes with the turf. And so we're kind of learned, I don't know, by accident as a sibling. So what was it like growing up in your household? Anybody? Well, I can start it if you want. So we grew up in New York, and we were that generation where parents say what goes on in the home no one talks about. So with my brother Rodney, his main disability was severe DD. He had autism. He was nonverbal, and he had major behaviors, kind of like Veronica's brother. And so we're just kind of figuring it out as we go. But I've been told, and I think it's a great analogy with all the stuff that goes on in a home, it's like growing up with an alcoholic in your home. And what I mean by that is that we could have plans to bring friends over, but if it's not a good day for our sib, then we cancel that plan, or we go play at someone else's house, or maybe there's disruptive behavior. We couldn't do board games in my house. He would either eat the part or disrupt the board game. So here I have a bunch of board games in my basement I want to play because I never got to play them. But I think that analogy is pretty interesting because it's kind of the world revolves sometimes around that person. And so I would like to hear if that's similar to you, or did you have a bed of roses growing up?
I'll go next. There was no bed of roses, but we lived out in the country. My mother did not drive. So if anyone went anywhere, the whole family went. 5 people got in the car, 5 people went. So we did not have that challenge of who's going to watch Nick. It was, we went to church, everybody went to church. We went out, everybody went. But like I said, he never went to the same school. Services were not public, and he went to public school. He was driven about 20 miles to go to public school. And so we moved when I was a young teenager to get better services. So I am sure some other families have had to do that. You move to get the services for your child. After we moved, my parents divorced, well, separated. Women did not have rights. And so my mother, as a single mother, had no rights, no financial rights, no civil rights. Before women had rights, no child support. And so the whole dynamic of the family changed because Jim and I became full-time care. Who's going to stay home and take care of Nick? Who's going to go to school? Who's going to miss school when his school is closed? And we became a tight unit of 4. How are we going to maintain this, this family? So it was a little different. That's why some people have typed in chat so many similar experiences, and I typed back, but yet so different.
Yeah.
And I'll be quiet.
From a parent's perspective, what I enjoy watching as our girls grow up, and one thing that I think has been kind of thoroughly taught to them just by life and seeing what their sister go through is that the fair and equal are not synonyms. You know, a lot of times as parents, it's important to us that we be fair. And I myself was guilty of this. You know, I grew up in a house where I didn't have a sibling with a disability. And if my parents talk about fairness, that means it's equal. We all get the same thing. And one of the lessons that our daughters have learned is fair and equal are not synonyms, because what's fair is not equal. And that is especially true, I think, when you have a sibling with a developmental disability.
Yeah, I'd have to say it was both roses and not roses. And it was like a little bit of both. I really got along with my older sister a lot. Like I don't know, we just have a special bond, like all 3 of us, like my sisters. And my sister isn't able to speak. So I think we enjoyed, like we found out ways how to like play with her and include her in things we did. We used to make movies, and we would do like voiceovers for her in our movies, and she'd be involved in them and all kinds of things like that. But Jackie a lot of times would have like behavioral outbursts in public, but it was more like crying. It wasn't like she wasn't trying to do anything, or it just would make a scene, and then it would embarrass my parents, and we'd have to, you know, like she didn't come to church with us, and she didn't do a lot of things with us because of that. And that was unfortunate. I wish that she could have been more included. I'm from a rural area, and it just wasn't, you know, like, I don't know, it just wasn't what we did. You know, we didn't get to include her enough in things. And my parents didn't have respite services. So me and my younger sister, a lot of times were watching my sister too. We called it babysitting, but I was 5 years younger than her. And we would, you know, like I was just very responsible. And like I have an 18-month-old now, and my mom's always making comments saying like, oh, you guys never did that. And my sister has kids too, and her oldest is 5. And she's like, you guys just would sit and listen whenever I said anything. And I'm not sure. I think that was the influence of Jackie. I mean, we just, like listened to our parents and tried not to make anything too difficult for them, because we knew they were going through a lot, like helping Jackie. So.
Well, I think I could go after you, because your last statement kind of reflects some of my life where I felt like I needed to kind of just be good. Like my grades were good, my behavior was good, everything was great. Nothing in my life was ever bad, not because it wasn't bad, but because I didn't want to, put anyone else through that kind of thing. So I was always fine. And that was kind of our family. We would just be like, and we'd arrive at church and we were fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry. And I think a lot of other families are similar in that way too, but we had our safe environments, like at home, that was a safe space for us. And we didn't actually have a lot of people over. I think it was too much for my mom, especially, and probably my dad too. It was like, we already have a full house, things are going on, what would happen? And then also going to like my grandpa's farm, that was a safe space for us because there's nobody judging us, no one's staring at us. We kind of got used to being stared at, which was fine. It's what you do, right? But it was kind of nice to have that safe space as well. I was definitely the younger sibling. So my brother Tyler's like about 1.5 years older than I am. And so I kind of matured a little faster than he did some. And so I would look after Charlie a little more, even though my parents were very, they worked hard to make sure we didn't feel like we had to be parents, that we had to do those things, even though I wanted to support my brother. I wanted to be there for him. And so like, I would kind of push in a little more. But it was nice that they gave me time. Like my mom would drive me to soccer when I was younger, and we had our mom and daughter time. And that was very important for us to have. But it was, and it was things like, yeah, we missed out on some things. But looking back, yeah, it's like, well, it's frustrating. Like, did you ever go to the movies? No. Did you go to the park and then had to leave like 10 minutes later because your brother wet his pants? Yeah. Did it change my life huge? No, those things didn't matter as much, but it was like those moments when like I did go to some of Charlie's events and I was just like overwhelmed with emotion, and that changed my life. And so there's some things that are just kind of like, frustrating, but overall it's that the bigger picture.
Thank you, Sarah. How about you, Veronica?
Yeah, I agree. I don't plan to have kids myself, and I don't I'm not very maternal, but anytime I do see younger children, I always am like, is that right? Like, is that age appropriate? Because I remember being 4 years old when Frank was born. I remember holding him and helping to get the glue off of his head from the EKG wires. And I remember changing diapers and giving him a bottle when I was 5. I remember all those things. And I see 4 and 5-year-olds just being kids. And I'm like, oh, geez, like, is that right? So it was so confusing for me for the longest time to understand the difference, because I think that we did mature a lot faster, and even if our parents tried to shield us from becoming parents, in a way we did, just either because we wanted to or because it was just a kind of a natural course of action for us.
I'm glad that you said that, because I'm going to switch a question I have here. It goes along the lines of what were the responsibilities that you had as a sibling? If looking back, do you think it was age appropriate for you to do something? For instance, my brother was a runner. We locked everything. We padlocked everything. He could climb. And it was my biggest fear that he would run away, especially when we're supposed to be watching him. So I wonder if any of you felt, when you're looking back, wow, we had a lot of responsibility that our peer did not. I also felt like I didn't get my friends because our lives were so more responsible and being the good daughter and, you know, becoming a people pleaser, which I'm learning to die to. But, you know, do you have an experience of a time when maybe a responsibility was a little bit too much for the age you were?
I'll start. I have to laugh because I think if DCF ever knew about our family, they would be cited. I was a latchkey kid at 9, coming home and taking care of 2 younger brothers because both of my parents work 30 miles away. This is before cell phones. So my mother would call and make a person-to-person long distance call and ask for herself, and I would answer and say, sorry, she's not home, and she would know that we were home safe. Neighbors knew we were home safe. How do you, as a young child, explain to your friends that, oh, excuse me, I have to go feed my brother, or I've got to go give him a bath, or I've got to go do his PT in range of motion? I still do not talk about everything that I had to do as a sibling. Of course, my life was not the same, and I never shared it and never met another sibling until I was working, and then became involved in developing Ohio Sibs, making it a nonprofit, and also starting the Sibling Leadership Network. But I had and I disclosed it at work because I would talk about the family experience. And one of my coworkers that was a personal friend for months, when I said something, said to me, you know, I have a sister. And I was like, you are kidding me. And that was like my first SIB friend, and that was 40 some years ago. So no, never had anyone to talk to, never had anyone to share the experience, and sure as heck did not leave your house and start talking about what happened in your house. I grew up in a very ethnic family. You did not. And if you were going to talk about business about your family, you immediately switched to Greek, so no one else could understand.
I just want to add to what Barbara and I have talked hours on the phone, and I remember, I'm just saying this because you guys can get it. I had gone to a counselor when I was 34 after my mom passed, and so, you know, you're pouring out your whole life, and my counselor looked at me seriously and she said, you have a high tolerance for inappropriate behavior. And I started laughing because I thought, it's got a name to it, you know? And, you know, that's one thing I've learned growing up, is that there are things that we learn to tolerate and adapt to. And you know what? I wouldn't change that for the world, because I think of all the wonderful people I have met who are inappropriate, and I have been so myself. So anyway, thanks, Barb.
Yeah, I agree that it has been difficult to find a source that kind of understands. I remember confiding in a guidance counselor or something, you know, some position, when I was still in school, and a couple of times, you know, I was pulled aside and, oh, you're very quiet, and you know, you're minding your own business. What's going on? Is everything okay at home? You know, I'm like, yeah, this is just what I do. And I would explain, and they would go, that's a lot on you. I am so sorry. And there would be some kind of letter sent home about, you know, age appropriate activities and whatnot. And I never understood that. I don't want my life to change. It just would be nice every now and then to get a high five and like, oh, that sucks. I see you're dealing with a lot. But it seemed like professionals always wanted to change my life and my responsibilities. And that wasn't what I was looking for.
Yeah, I had similar feelings of feeling isolated. I never had anyone to talk to about it. And I guess I didn't think of talking to other people about it because it just didn't, the opportunity never arose. But when I finally could, it was almost just a relief. And I probably talked a little too much to the first couple people I talked to, but that's okay. And growing up, I didn't have as many responsibilities as I kind of mentioned earlier, because my parents were really trying not to burden me with things, but I was the one who I wish I went to more of the meetings. You know, I finally, when I started getting a little older, like high school and stuff, I talked to my mom about some of the meetings. And then when I was a young adult, like that's when it started, we would prepare for the meetings together, right? We're like, we got this plan, we can do this, and who knows what happens. And then you're like, okay, let's do this now. And, you know, there's all those plannings and like debriefing and all of that. And I do remember I think I was around 30 when I started talking to my parents about like, hey, future planning. And it took about 10 years before something solid actually came about. But it was like just those plant the seed. Hey, I learned something in class, or hey, I read this in a book. And so it's like I would like to have more involvement in some of those things to really support my brother, to make sure, you know, his voice is heard a little more. But that didn't come naturally to my family. They were much more protective of us.
Yeah. As far as responsibility goes, I kind of always considered myself the third parent, and my younger sister and I talk about this. She was kind of a kid and I was a third parent. And, but I wouldn't say I was forced to do the responsibilities. I really was eager to help, and I wanted to help. And I think mainly what it did is it kind of, I didn't have kids as soon as a lot of other people that I knew. I just had a baby and I'm 35. I kind of held off because I wanted to kind of figure out who I was and not go right into parenting right away. It was kind of scary for me to think about because I had all those responsibilities. But I took care of my sister quite a bit, but I would say my parents didn't force me to, but I was just very eager to do that, and they needed the help. So,
You know, Deb, if I can jump in, you know, a lot of sibling studies have shown that a lot of siblings, especially sisters, tend to be the good child, because we know our parents are overwhelmed and they're busy. And so we're like we'll do some things, we'll help out. We're good in school. You know, Veronica, you were too quiet. I love that. But, you know, we didn't cause, I don't know if y'all did, but I'm guessing you didn't. You were not exactly the troublemakers in school. You were the good students. You had good grades. You probably, you know, you did your stuff, whether it was sports or other activities. And so that's one path that a lot of siblings will take, because we realize life is different. We may not be able to articulate it, but we also know we don't want to cause more work in the family home.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Barb, for that. So I'm looking at the time, and gosh, we could talk about all this stuff for forever. So we're getting to the difficult conversation. Looking at your life today with your sib, how different is it from what you envisioned growing up? And I'm saying this because I always thought my brother would live with me. And I always thought, I always made anyone I was dating pass the Rodney test. So they had to be okay with my brother Rodney, even though he would go face to face, do a stare cut. But that was so important to me because we're a family. And so I always thought that once I got married, and my husband, by the way, passed the test, but I always thought that he would live with me, and then the vision was broken because my brother's behavior was so difficult, very aggressive, and we had to have him taken out of our home because we were getting beaten up all the time. So sometimes our vision for life without Sib is going to be, easy, but sometimes there's a curveball that's thrown, and so that whole decision making of where he was going to live no longer became a conversation I had to have with my family. So I want to pose that same question to you guys. Is your life similar to what you always thought it would be, or is it just a different picture?
My life is very similar to what I had planned. I guess the only thing that surprised me a bit is the kind of transfer of responsibility from my parents to me. I guess I thought once I was a grown up and I had a real job and I had a real house and I was established, then I would become Frank's guardian. I would become Frank's caregiver. He would move in with me. And my parents had us later in life. So my mom is in her mid-60s. And she is very adamant that she wants to remain involved. She wants to continue as Frank's guardian. She wants him to continue to live in her house, even though he comes over to my house and hangs out all day long. But she wants to retain that responsibility and that control. And that surprised me because I thought after 23 years, she'd be tired of it and be ready to pass the reins. But that transition is surprising, and it is taking longer to process through than I imagined.
I think growing up, I always thought I would be taking care of Nick, but as I got older and I wanted my life, I wanted to be a professional. I wanted to go to college. I realized I couldn't provide that day-to-day care and work, but I still wanted to support Nick. And my brother was able to make decisions. So many times his team would say, you need to be his guardian. And I refused. I said, he can make his own decisions. We grew up in Cleveland, in the Cleveland area. We grew up in the 60s. If any of you know the history, civil rights was very, very big. I did not realize that my brother did not have civil rights. And I often stood up for him in his high school and in his life, and did not realize until I became a professional that he did not have civil rights. So I always thought, if I can do it, you can do it. And so my support was more of, Nick, you don't have to do what they say you have to do. You can do what you want to, as long as it's not illegal, and you can tell them no. And I was able to support his autonomy and support him to make decisions throughout his life, and gave him the power to say no, and supported him when he said no, all the way through the end of his life. So I supported him and had those difficult conversations. What do you want to do before you die? You are ill, you're dying. What do you want to do? What plans do you want to make? And sometimes they were against what my mother would want. And so I thought, thank you, Nick, you've now put me in a real challenging position, but I made a promise to support him and support his decisions. So I have no regrets. I couldn't take care of him physically, but I did what I could.
Go ahead, Sarah, sorry.
Oh, okay. I remember very explicitly that at age 14, I was going to have to take care of Charlie. He was going to have to live with me when we got older because our other brother wasn't mature enough. Now, granted, he was 15. But I was like, nope, Tyler's not mature enough. I'm going to have to take care of Charlie. I'm pretty sure he's going to live with me. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a boring job so that it pays enough for the both of us. And I don't know if I can take on a man or anything like that. And it was just like, I was like limiting my life with that. And then I didn't know about services. I didn't know about anything. I didn't know my parents had plans. And so things changed a lot. My brother has been living with the same person for over 20 years now, which, like, okay, that's great. Even like in the middle of my life, let's say I was in my 30s, I was like, someday I'm going to get a duplex and he's going to live on one side and I'm going to live on the other. But that will probably never happen. So it's kind of been like that flux of, you know, balancing out what's really doable, and, you know, how can he be supported with, yes, me living my life at the same time, like my jobs have forced me to move states. You know, I grew up in Nebraska. To be a professor, you often have to move to another state. And that was a big guilt trip of mine. And I was going through that decision of, well, if I needed to support him, do I quit my job? You know, end it that year and then just move back to Nebraska so that I can support him. And so those things kind of kept coming up of, I was always thinking of like the future planning part of it. But now it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I think by this time, I'm like, that's okay. I will be there for him, but I can't even plan it at this point.
Yeah, I'm still kind of going through the trying to get my parents to do future planning process. And I think it's going to take 10 years, like Sarah Hall is saying. It's been very, very difficult because my mom just sees her role as a caregiver because she gave up her nursing career to take care of my sister, and it's just part of her identity. And but anyways, I had always said growing up, you know, Jackie's just going to live with me, and I will just live in this farmhouse that I grew up in, and we will be here. And you know, it just kind of like the whole just thinking it will all work out that way when you're 10 years old. But the services, there's hardly any services around where my sister is. And, you know, thinking about that, like where can she get better services or get more help? And having a daughter really changes things too, because I have to consider her life in whatever my decision is. And I know that I'll be helping my sister, but I'm still not sure if she's going to live with me or not. It still isn't, it's kind of up in the air. And when I finally got to go to some ISP meetings with my sister about a couple years ago, the first one I went to, the solution was, where will Jackie live when she grows up? And the service coordinator said, well, she has 2 sisters. So, and that was the response to that. And I didn't say anything. I was just trying to, you know, start my way in and just listen. And I'm just kind of trying to take it slow, even though you never know what can happen. But yeah, there's a lot more planning that needs done in my family. So just to make sure my sister has a good life.
Yeah. So that's a great segue on, you know, how many of you panel parents have taught you about a future plan with your sibling? Yeah. Veronica?
I think it wasn't until I became a professional in this field that we really started to talk about it, because I continued to bring it up. I printed out the future planning tools, and I printed out the all kinds of documents, different tools to just kind of create building blocks. But I think it only goes so far to address the emotional side of it. My mom expects that she will outlive Frank, and when he passes away, she can go a day later, and that will be a life well lived. And we don't know if it's going to happen that way. So I do have a plan for how I will move forward if Frank and I both outlive her. But in her mind, she is living as long as Frank is, plus a day, and that is the idea.
Yeah, I remember when I was probably about 40, I met a sibling who was 10 years older, and she was telling me that her parents are aging and her parents still haven't talked to her about the plan. So she kind of lives in this, I can't move forward with Michael because I don't know what this is. And, you know, I think that tension is constantly there for siblings. I think younger families are more savvy in having these kind of conversations. It seems that way, but this is where I'm going to include Derek in so that we can allow some time for Q&A as well. You know, we talked in the beginning using the trajectory tool, you know, what is a good life, what you want and what you don't want. And I have found talking with some parents, you know, they'll talk about what their good life is for their son, and just using that tool, talking to them, I will also start saying, what are your future plans for your son? Because that's a conversation that needs to happen. And the earlier, the better, because everyone's getting on the same page. Yes, a wrench may be thrown and things may turn out differently, but we live as siblings, we are always on edge. Is it a good day? You know, is he gonna be sick and spend the night in the hospital? Cancel plans. All that stuff happens. We're worried about that, and we're trying to juggle and keep the peace in the house. And so it's a difficult upbringing, whether we knew it or not. Most likely we didn't, because it's all the life we knew. So Derek, I want to talk about you know, when you have these meetings, you have families, a lot of families, and you have a lot of professionals asking questions about the topic that you have at hand, whether it be on benefits or guardianship or advocacy. What has been like your experience talking to siblings as you've been doing this?
So generally, what I hear, and it's something I've heard tonight, that when parents look at it, they do often have the perspective of, you know, I don't want to burden my other kids, or I don't want to unnecessarily impact their lives in a way that hurts them. And so they don't include, or they don't have the hard conversations. And there's no greater burden I think you can place on a sibling than not having those conversations, because then when the parent passes away, at that point, the sibling is that support structure, part of that support team, and they're going to step in, and most of the time they're going to want to step in and get involved. And you've just made it harder for them to do so by not having the difficult conversations, by not planning things out. And so it's counterintuitive. By trying to protect sibling or protect the other kids, sometimes I think we put them in a worse position. And that's something we see a lot. And that's, you know, that's why I really encourage people to explore some of the tools Barb was talking about with charting the life course. I mean, those things are great tools to have. When parents pass away and families come in and they're sitting at the conference room table, and maybe it's close family friends or siblings or anyone else involved, they've loved their sibling their whole life. But most of the time, as they've gotten into adulthood, the parent is still there at first. And so they start developing their own life. And it's not that they love their sibling any less, but they're just not there on a day-to-day basis as much as they were when they were younger. And then that kind of whiplashes back around when the parent dies. And those siblings are starving for information. They're starving for that final guidance from their parent. They're wanting that meaningful information from the parent. And that's what I see the most. And we see clients that come in where there's been no transition planning, and that's rough. And we see clients that come in where there was a lot of transition planning, and it's still rough, but it is not nearly as hard when you've had good transition planning. There is a sense of I think, of being overwhelmed, and there's a lot to figure out. And our system is really big, and it's in Ohio, we have a really good developmental disability system. There are a lot of resources, there are a lot of good programs, but you have to know how to navigate it. And I tell families all the time, if you gave me a choice of a trust with $500,000 in it that's going to be there for my daughter when I'm gone, or a really good advocate that's going to be there for my daughter when I'm gone, I would take the advocate in a heartbeat. Because in our system, a good advocate doesn't need money to navigate and good outcomes. They just need to be a good advocate, know what to ask for, how to ask for it, and when to ask for it. And that's where planning comes in. Deb, I don't even remember what your question is, so I don't know if that answered it or not.
Well, yes. I mean, I'm hoping, as I reflect on the answers from the start of this meeting, is that people will see, you know, as siblings, we had this life growing up, and then all of a sudden we're transitioning, and now we're older, and is that our past does influence us, you know, and it influences us in our decision making, our fears, whatever. So I love the fact that you decided to be on this panel, Derek, because information is amazing. if they get good information. So I know people have asked about your sessions that you have, and you did post your website, correct? Yeah, and then Barb did the frno.org website as well. So you can learn when you can join one of these virtual meetings. They're an hour long. Derek is a pro at it, and he allows a lot of time for Q&A. So I really appreciate you being part of this, and having a father's perspective. It's nice to have a male input. So,
Thanks.
Oh,
go ahead.
Deb, there've been some questions about, specifically about, I want my brother or sister to be living here. As siblings, one of the first things, and I was a service coordinator, I was a support administrator at Cuyahoga County. One of the first things that I would ask families is, what will it look like? So don't think about a group home with 2 other people, or, what is your vision? Do you want them to live in the city? Do you want them to live in a house, in an apartment? Because there are more options than just a group home. People can live in apartments. People can live in, somebody mentioned a duplex. One of the Sibs on the panel, who wanted to buy a duplex? Was it you, Sarah?
That was me.
Oh, okay. I thought it was you,
Yeah.
Sarah. I thought maybe it wasn't. But there's lots of options, but you got to have the vision of, what would a good life be? Do you want them to be in the city? The sister at the beginning that I shared her story, she said, I can't move him from this neighborhood where he knows everybody. Everybody knows him. If they see him having trouble, he's got lots of help because everybody likes him and they know him. He knows how to get to the store. Think about the vision first versus the placement. And then talk to the team about, we'd like to talk about where could they live and still be whatever the parameters are. And then talk to the team and see what the possibilities are, and they can help you look into resources, look into possibilities, look into funding. But you got to have that vision. What will be a good place? Do they need to live alone because it works better? And you've heard some of us say we made very intentional choices about whether we are having children or when we had those children. And, think about all of that. Have the vision first. That's why the trajectory is so important. And then figure out what the foundation is that you have to build. Do you need a trust? Do you have a power of attorney? Do you need a guardian? And Derek can help with all of that kind of conversation. But what is a good life for your family member first?
Thank you, Barb. I'm going to go ahead and open this for Q&A. So let's see how I can get all of us unpinned so we can see everybody. Barb, do you know how to do that?
To do what, Deb?
So we
Open
can see
it
everybody.
up?
Yeah.
So you can see everybody?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I
here,
can.
gallery.
Yes.
There we are.
Yes.
All right, we're open for questions and answers or thoughts. Is anyone currently their sibling's guardian?
Hi, this is Kim. I got on late. It was a busy time, but yes, I am my sister's guardian of the person. And it's been a rough year. My dad died in April, and we're trying to figure lots of things out still, but it's coming along. It's not exactly what you plan, but you figure it out.
So I am my sister's guardian recently, as of 2021, because my parents are aging. So this is a late conversation, but there was some planning, but limited. And I was always the one closest to my sibling, to my sister, Karen. And so I'm struggling because I need her closer to me. You know, I'm one of those who went and was encouraged to have a career, but decided not to have children because I figured that this was going to happen at some point, theoretically, and now it's happening. And so I'm sort of new to understanding the system and, you know, the powers of attorney and all that stuff. But right now I'm just trying to get her closer to me because the people who her network in her neighborhood, who know her and trust her and who she knows and trusts. She's nonverbal, so that makes it a little bit more mysterious. They're all retiring and leaving. So her new staff don't have that sort of connection to her. And, you know, they're not like her family growing up. So if devoid of that, at least you can be close to me so I can be holding people accountable on a daily basis.
I'm also my brother's guardian of the person and his full-time caregiver. Obviously, he also lives with us.
Derek, have you ever had siblings talk to you about what needs to go in place? And if you're working with someone, do they have to be a guardian of that person to work with you? I don't know if I'm even asking the right question, but like if the parents are guardians and they're not doing anything, I mean, I want to encourage siblings to get as much information that you can.
Yeah. I'm sorry. There's never a scenario where you should get guardianship for any reason other than the individual really needs a guardian. So just being a sibling, if your desire is access to information, there's lots of ways you can get access to information short of a guardianship. And there's, you know, one of our industry always has as buzzwords and one concept that's growing in popularity, has been around forever, but it's growing in popularity now, is supported decision-making. And so there's lots of different options and ways you can go about being a support for a sibling. Guardianship is one of those ways. It's not the only way. For some individuals, they absolutely will need guardianship. For others, they will not. And that should be a very, very case-by-case decision for families. Now, if you're in a family where guardianship is necessary, then that's another way parents can plan ahead, because you can take over or step in as a co-guardian while your parents are alive in most counties, not all counties. So there's a lot of planning that can be done there. So
I know that my when my mom passed away, my dad and I became co-guardian, and the plan was if my dad would pass away, there would be no hiccup in guardianship. So at that time, you had to apply for guardianship every 2 years. Now it's every year. But it gave me a little sense of peace knowing that, you know, there would not be that hiccup at least for a year.
yeah, absolutely.
I think as far as county board planning, guardianship isn't necessary, but I would make sure that siblings are on the release of information. So they can also speak with the support administrator, with the planning team. I think that is the most important thing in terms of just general planning that we do service-wide.
I think that's a great point, Veronica. And one thing I will say is that most adults with disabilities do not realize that they can ask their siblings to be at their meeting or part of their team. Because when I ask them, who was at your meeting, they'll say mom or dad, and I will tell them you can have anyone you want. And they look at me and go, no, I can't. And I said, yes, you can. If they tell me I'm close to my sister or brother, I say, you know, you can ask them to also be part of the meetings or to get the information. All you have to do is say, I want them, or I want them to know. And most do not know, because most professionals, when they think family members, they are thinking parents. And I say that as a sibling that's been part of many legislative work groups. And at the meetings, they'll thank thank you parents for coming. And I'll be standing there going, you know, I'm not a parent. I do not hide my identity. And they do not even include siblings when they think of family. And yet, as many of us know, we take on formal and informal roles throughout our siblings' life.
That's a pet peeve of mine as well. It's constant from the Arc of Ohio and all kind of different groups. Sibs are never recognized.
In fact, well, you're the guardian, but in fact, I learned as a sib that I could not use family medical leave because sibling is not considered a family member under the Family Medical Leave Act, unless you are the legal guardian.
And if you happen to mention, there are also siblings here, not just parents, they get offended.
Yep.
I was gonna, let me remember, Sarah Hall, when you do your talk about the sandwich generation, is that something that you will be addressing, is, you know, the different responsibilities a sibling can have?
Yeah, we will talk about some of those as well. So you guys know a lot of them, but there might be some where you're like, oh, yeah, those are ones that I'm looking to do too, or maybe those are ones you haven't realized.
And Barb, would you explain next week's presentation that you'll be giving?
Oh, sure, thanks. I'm going to actually walk you through two of the resources and tools from Charting the Life course that help us look at relationships. One helps us look at not only the roles we have, but the roles that other people have in our life, and the reciprocity of the roles that our siblings have in our life. Some of us have already shared the impact and the roles that our brothers and sisters have in our lives. The other one can be used as you start thinking ahead. Who can? And it breaks down caring for and a caring about. You know, the caring about are the emotional caring, the caring for are the day-to-day physical. But, you know, our parents probably told us, it's me, I'm going to do everything, it's me, I'm the one. And that's why it takes 10 years to talk to them about future plans, right? Because it's me. And so I will walk you through how to use a tool to start breaking down those supports and thinking beyond, it's just got to be me now, the big sister or the younger sister or whatever, but who else can do this?
I'm looking at the chat from Jill. Can you briefly address what is the process for SIB to co-guardian after the parent is already legal guardian and the SIB lives in another county?
So co-guardianship, first of all, guardianship is governed by the county probate court in which the individual with a disability lives. So the county of residence for the person with disability, that county's probate court governs guardianship. Probate courts, the overwhelming majority of probate courts will allow co-guardianships. There are a few county probate courts in the state of Ohio that will not allow co-guardianships. Assuming you're in a county that does allow co-guardianships, then as a sibling, you would need to talk to your parents, see if they're okay with you being a co-guardian, submit an application. You go through the same process they went. It's a paperwork-driven process. You submit the paperwork to the court. The court's going to hold a hearing. The court then will appoint you as co-guardian. Those counties that do allow co-guardians will generally only appoint two. So if both parents are guardian, what we generally see here is when a parent is no longer able to do it or starts to get up there in age, ask one of the parents to resign so that the sibling can become the guardian. So then as the parents do get older and are less able to be that support system that the person needs, the sibling is already in place as guardian.
And Jenny Han, did we answer your question of your text? You said the pressing need for me to be my sister's guardian. Did we
Oh,
already
so
address that?
that was more just of a clarification because, you know, there's a question about like when does the sibling become guardian and this and that. But so my story is that my parents gave up guardianship, and so it became a third party hired guardian, I guess. And that I think worked for a little while, but my parents started to realize that they wanted me to take responsibility over my sister in later in life, I guess. And so, and they also thought, well, we told you we wanted you to take over, and therefore magically you are her guardian. Like, how does that work? So we had to do this very quickly. We had legal assistance, luckily, and the guardian agreed to hand over like simultaneously, so that when my sister had her cancer surgery, I was able to say, you know, what she needed in real time, just in the nick of time. So that was less a question than just a comment. But
Thank you.
I am seeking more legal advice on the transfer between Cuyahoga County in Ohio and Cook County in Chicago, and I'm finding it's very complicated.
Wow.
Well, I think with my dad, he was proactive in moving Karen, my sister, from Summit County to Washington County, but I live in West Virginia. So when he decided I've been in training for 10 years, learning all this stuff. He decided he was getting up in age. He said, why don't you become the guardian? I'll become the advocate. So I became the guardian for 5 years and he was the advocate. He still made all the decisions and had a lot of input, but I did all the legwork and was available for all the meetings and everything. And the last year it was good because I could do all that when he health-wise could not. But I am out of state, so it can be done. I just don't know what your county's like.
Diana Temple, would you put the Ohio SIBS website in the chat for
Yes,
me?
of course.
And Veronica wrote, I believe if co-guardianship is not an option, SIBS can be instead named the beneficiary of any special needs trust, and accounts can be transferred upon death after your parents are gone. It sounds like you had legal help with that, Veronica?
Actually, it's very easy to do. So we live in Cuyahoga County. They don't allow co-guardianships as far as I know, unless something changed recently. So unfortunately, there's no option for me to be added on to Frank's guardianship, but we did everything that we could to ensure that I was attached to him in every way possible, just in case. So we were able to log on to his special needs trust and add me as a beneficiary, because of course things can't be in his name or else his benefits are in jeopardy. And we were able to indicate that things would transfer to me on his behalf after my mother was gone. And as far as a letter of intent, you can just write it on a piece of notebook paper, and as long as you sign and date it, it will be considered part of the will of your parents. So if they specify that they would like you to be involved and be the primary contact person, that will 99% of the time be sufficient to establish yourself as next in line.
Just to clarify, if the parents though are nominating you as a successor guardian, that has to be a little bit more formal. You have to have 2 disinterested witnesses sign and attest to having seen the parents do it if you want it to be a legal nomination of a successor guardian.
Is there a formal document to do that, or is it similar to a letter of intent? You just need witnesses in addition.
You need what's called an attestation clause. I can email you one, Veronica. They're not. It's not rocket science, but you do, if you want it to be legally, if you want the court to be legally required, because what happens, and this is another area where siblings are discounted by the law. When it comes to nominating a successor guardian, a parent has the legal authority to nominate who the successor guardian will be when they are no longer here. A sibling does not. So as the parent, I can nominate who I want the guardian to be when I'm gone. Now, there are in the statute, there's a couple of formal steps you have to take. And if I make that nomination, then the court is obligated to presume that the person I've nominated is the best suited person to serve as that legal guardian. Now, every single county has a shortage of guardians right now. So if the person you nominate, I don't care if you write it on a piece of tissue, if they're willing to apply and they don't have a criminal record, the court's going to appoint them. But if there's some kind of something contested where multiple people have applied, then it will be very important that it was done following the formalities.
Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it. Nobody
Oh, no,
else
no,
wants
you're-
to take control of my brother, so I know I'm the only one.
And you want to get it right,
That doesn't mean. the
right?
court-
No surprises. We have enough surprises.
Right.
So Diana wrote in the chat that they're having Ohio Sib Talk coming up, which is just virtual, so you can sit in the comfort of your own home, grab a cup of coffee, and chat with other Sibs. Do you have a topic that you're talking about specifically for that one, Diana?
Yes, Lynn Calloway is going to be leading our SIB talks, and the first one is about glass children, and it's on Thursday, February 23rd at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
But there's a whole bunch of sessions, and there'll be more details to come, but the topics are listed all on the Eventbrite website. So.
All right. Well, it's 8 o'clock, and I thank you, my panel first, for coming on board and supporting the Sibs who've joined this meeting. You know, there's power in numbers, and I know Ohio Sibs would like to see more Sibs be a part of that. You know, when you think about supporting each other as well as potential policy making, things like that, to help encourage sibling to be recognized, Sibs to be recognized. So I appreciate you all joining us. If you have any other question, feel free. I put my email connected, sorry, my typo, it's connected in the chat. And if you would be amazing, if you would answer 3 questions on the survey. I made it really simple. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate all of you, and Siblings Rock. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you guys for just being you and being a part of this. I appreciate it. If I can return the favor, please let me know. So, have a good night.
I don't know if you've read the chat of how many people did not realize there were resources for siblings and were not connected to any group of siblings. It's amazing. So nice job, Deb, pulling
Yeah.
it together and
Well,
getting
it's
the
just
word
the
out.
beginning, and you know, encouraging Diana as she grows Ohio Sibs. But I appreciate all of you. Have a good night's rest. Derek, thank your wife for always helping us in the evenings on these kind of events.
No problem.
Appreciate you all.
Okay.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
What was that?
I just said bye, everybody.
Oh, okay. See ya. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.